Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're gonna go through a little bit of setup here of how to set up the S.A.F super clutch and a little bit of maintenance. Also, I want to just touch base on a quick tip that I like to do when I board out my engines and set it up. I like to make marking plates. It makes it quick and simple. I do a lot of engines. I don't know if you're just doing one engine, it might not be worth it, but I do quite a few of them. So what I do is I make a template like this, and it's the same size as my ports, just like that. Also the center one for the exhaust, and that way I can just easily just put it in, line up the holes, mark it out. It's marked quick and easy, and same as for the intake side. That way I don't have to try to figure out where the hole is or anything. It's already figured out every time. It's the same. So with this this plate here, what I use it for is transferring my transfers, because usually on these China doll jugs, the transfer port is larger than the case. So usually you end up needing to port out the case to port match it. So I've come up with this template, and what I do is I just put it onto my engine case like that, and you can see the difference in the ports, how much you need to really take out. Now I don't dig it out really deeply, I just make it so that it's port matched, cutting it on an angle so that it matches the jug, so you get nice even flow. So anyway, so that's just a quick tip there to start off this this video. So we're going to go ahead and dismantle this and pull the clutch out.
botched. Okay.
All right, now we've gotten the shaft out. I'm going to take this half moon out here, put it into the vise here and just knock that out. And then we're going to take the spring off the cap here, the bearing. All right, bearings out. They're a little bit tight, so we're going to just put a little emery cloth on both sides again, so the bearings can accept it easily. And I'm just going to leave in this one bearing on this side, so when I put it back in, it'll just slide in. I'll put the bearing in and we'll reassemble it. There is a tool for this. I don't have it, so I just use pair of pliers and just remove it. Okay, so now we're just removing the collar. Put this over here because we won't need that. Take out the pin. There it goes. Pin, spring. Remove this collar as well. And we got the flower nut, bar, and empty shaft. All right. So this is all we're going to keep, is we're going to keep this bearing, keep this shaft. And I have another one over here that I've already done. We're going to cut a slot in there for adjustment, for fine-tune adjustments. And we'll use that one. Let's take this one aside and we'll use this one. So a little bit of emery cloth and we'll clean it up. So don't take too much of this off, just keep checking it. Make sure that the bearing goes on snug, but not as tight as it originally was. That's too tight. You're forcing things together. When you force things together, it's never really good. It's okay to remove a little bit of material here to get it to fit nice and snug. Never remove it from the inside of the case to get the bearing to go in easier. You'll end up, the bearing will spin and you'll just damage your case. If you remove too much of this too, it has a possibility to spin on the shaft if the bearing seizes up. Or if it's just, you know, the bearing's not set properly, or, you know, whatever. But, so you just want to remove a bit of it and keep checking it. That's way too tight. So I'll work on this for a little bit.
Speed up the camera to make it a little quicker until we get a nice fit bearing.
This is 120 grit emery cloth and 240. .240 is nice for gives a nice polish. It's getting there, but not quite. And this one is tight. Has to sit up to here. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal up this hole so that when we fill this cavity with grease, it won't come out of that hole, and your clutch will keep grease in it for a longer period of time. So this tape too, if it were to ever come off, I mean, that's an empty cavity. It's not going to go anywhere. Which I'm using electrical tape here. It's pretty hard. It'd be pretty hard for that to come off. I'm going to go with a few wraps. And also, you know, some guys might say, oh, well, you know, the engine gets hot. Well, there's an air pocket here. I mean, some of the heat might transfer through. Most of the heat is at the top and transferring through. A little bit of transfer of heat through here, through the clutch, but I don't think it's enough to, you know, melt or remove the tape. So, okay, so now the rod is will hold grease into it and keep grease into it, because lubrication is really important. And I just want to remind you that the threaded side here is the clutch side when we go to install it. Okay, we're just about ready to install it all back together. We have our flower nut shaft cut for fine adjustment, and we're going to go ahead and put the bearing back onto the shaft, and we're going to install it back into the case, which should go in fairly easy with a little bit of restriction there. Okay. I had this made up years ago. for installing bearings, and it's a nice little handy tool. It's heavy, and it's easy for setting bearings nice and true and flat. If you don't have one of those, you can use a socket will do. The last little bit of it, I'll have to use a socket, and I'll use a 26 mil socket and just tap it back so until it sets to the case. Careful not to hit any of the cover, which is protecting the bearings. If you hit into those, it's going to rub on the bearings and cause premature wear. You can pretty much tell your bearings set when you start getting this hollow tingy sound, and that's when it's actually sit flat on the inside of the case. I'm going to go ahead and turn this around, and I'm just going to tap this side just to make sure both sides are nicely set onto the inside of the case. I just noticed putting this in, this bearing hasn't been damaged. You know, when we put it in, it's nice and sitting straight, but when they did it at the factory, you have to be careful. Sometimes these things aren't always put together 100%. So I just noticed here that this one here has been damaged right here and here, and this cover is sitting in there. So when I'm rotating it, I'm getting really rough as it turns. So I'm going to take it out again and then pull this bearing out, replace it, and we'll see where we're at. Okay, I've gone ahead and replaced the bearing that was damaged. This is the way it should be, nice free turning. Also, if you look at it, the keyway is right up against the bearing here, and not like up here or anything. So the shaft is nicely centered. Something I just look at before I install it to make sure the shaft is in all the way, and the bearings are all set to the inside of the case. And if they're not, it's not going to turn properly either if they're a little bit cocked in there. Okay, so that's good. I like that. So I can go ahead and we'll speed up the film here, and we'll go ahead and reassemble everything. Okay, in the basket, we're going to need to remove these pins. And then we're going to need to tap. The tap we're going to use is a 1/4 20. Drop a little bit of tapping oil on here. A little bit of wrap tap. Remember too, when adjusting this clutch, this is a 1/4 20 tap that we're using a standard shoulder bolt that requires a 532 Allen key.
Go ahead and drop it on here.
Okay, I've gone ahead and replaced the bearing that was damaged. This is the way it should be, nice free turning. Also, if you look at it, the keyway is right up against the bearing here, and not like up here or anything. So the shaft is nicely centered. It's something I just look at before I install it to make sure the shaft is in all the way and the bearings are all set to the inside of the case. And if they're not, it's not going to turn properly either if they're a little bit cocked in there. Okay, so that's good. I like that. So I can go ahead and we'll speed up the film here, and we'll go ahead and reassemble everything. Okay, in the basket, we're going to need to remove these pins. And then we're going to need to tap. The tap we're going to use is a 1/4 20. Drop a little bit of tapping oil on here. A little bit of wrap tap. Remember too, when adjusting this clutch, this is a 1/4 20 tap that we're using a standard shoulder bolt that requires a 532 Allen key.
Go ahead and drop it on here.
Right, we're good to go. Turns nice and freely. Okay. Okay, so now that we have this all installed, this is nice and flush. We're ready to accept shoulder bolts. The gear's back on. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to install the clutch now. Ready now to install the S.A.F super clutch. We're going to take the flower nut rod and we're going to install it into the clutch. We're going to install it all the way until it hits the bottom. Then we're going to take this locking nut that comes in kit and we're going to put that on. That's a 10 millimeter and we're going to tighten it up. Not too tight, just until it touches the bottom. Just so it just touches the bottom. Okay, now we can go ahead and, no, just one sec. We're going to take a little bit of grease and we're going to put a little bit of grease in on this side.
I'm just going to push it into the hole. See if it's right in there. Just fill it up. I'm just going to remove this top bit. So, we're going to install the S.A.F super clutch onto the pan, line up the holes, and we're going to press screws on.
And we're just going to put them on so they're hand tight. So they're holding the clutch to the pads is what we're trying to do. Not put all the full tension. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a standard Allen head now. Tapped out at quarter 20 and it takes a 532 Allen key, not a metric. You don't want to strip it out. So I'll just tighten it just a little one turn, just to make sure it's holding to, that one's not quite down, so it's holding down to the pads flat. Okay. Okay, that side's pretty much ready and complete. And what we're going to do is go to the other side. Now we're going to take some more grease.
Put it into the hole. I'm just going to use a... No, okay, push it in there. Push more. Push it down. Try to move. Put a fair amount in there. Make sure that cavity is nice and full of lubrication. Right. So it's not too bad.
You can also go ahead later on, you know, after you run your clutch for a little while, run your bike, you always go in and open these up, add some more grease to it. That goes for your gear too, your basket gear, which I haven't greased yet on the other side to lubricate this area here on the main gear, but we'll do that afterwards. So I'll just wipe up some of this the outside and we'll go ahead and take our ball bearing, making sure it's clean, and install it in there. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. So I got a bucking bar here. It measures out we're about 44.5 Usually I send a little bit longer length so that you can adjust it for just in case you have a tensioner, you know, that makes that a little bit more space in here and keeps the plate further back. That way you have a little bit more bar so you can you know, make it the right size for your build. This one here won't have a tensioner on it, and the tensioner will be on the frame, so we can just make it like the stock bucking bar. But before we go into that, I'll go back to a couple quick tips for porting cylinders. So what I got here is a little bit of 240 cloth, and what I like to do is cut a piece, you know, about so big, and I like to roll it up really tight like this, and so it's nice and tight like that. And what I'll do is I'll open up my drill all the way, and I'll just insert it in there. Insert it all the way to the back. If I can get this one in. Usually it's not so difficult. I have a little bit too much material here. Okay, there's starting to go. Okay, we just push it in, keep rotating it until we feel it go to the back of the chuck. Okay, so it's at the back of the chuck. Then we'll spin it so it tightens up. And now we got a little polisher. So this cylinder here that we ported out, some of the ports are a little bit rough after porting it, and this makes it nice, quick, and easy. You can just insert your brush inside the port like this. Good to come through like that, and then just spin it. And this will nicely polish your port. Go that on as much as you want. Move around side to side, all the way around, in and out. And that's 240 grit. So you can do that as much as you want until you get a nice polished port. We'll pull that out and take a quick look at that now. See how it's nice, getting nice and smooth all the way around. You can just continue doing that until you get it to where you want it. And you can do this to all the ports. Just put it back inside there and spin it. Nice and easy, a lot easier than using your fingers. And it's a cheap alternative because that pad's fairly reasonable to purchase. And I like using that stuff for everything, for polishing all aluminum. And just spinning on the inside there. Nicely polishing it, pushing it side to side. And the port's really nicely getting polished up. So anyways, that's a quick little tip for porting. Nice wide exhaust port, and real nice boost port, nice and wide. This thing should really rip. You can also go inside the transfers, make a little bit smaller one, you know, so it actually fits in there. This one's a little bit too big, and just do the same thing, and you can polish out all your transfers all the way through, and you can use smaller ones for the edges. And I went back to, now I got this case port matched to the jug. Like I was saying, the jug is always the ports are always larger than the case. And all I do, since this is just a street racing cylinder and not a track racing cylinder, I don't go too aggressive with it because I like to leave a little bit extra room for sealing. So what I'll do is I'll leave the jug, I'll polish it out, and we'll use our template like I said earlier, and that I've made up so I can easily do any case. And I don't go too aggressive like for a street racer. It's only a small amount of material that I remove after I've marked it, quickly ported it out, and that'll give really good fuel transfer up into the jug. Okay, so that was a quick little tip there for porting, polishing your cylinder. Okay, let's get back to this bucking bar. Okay, so we're at 44.5 millimeters. We'll insert it into the case, and we have a flat side like I said on here, and what we're going to do is we're going to put it against it. Now if you see here, the bar is too long and it's leaving a gap, and that bar is nice and flat, and that's where we want it nice and rigid like that, because we know that this bar, the flat side, is right up against that bucking bar. Now some guys aren't cutting this bucking bar down far enough and might leave a small space, and what that does is when you tighten this down with the screws, all you're doing is pushing the clutch out and disengaging it. So you really don't have a chance to actually set your clutch up properly if this bucking bar isn't at the correct length. Okay, so after we've done that, took a rough amount that we know that we need to reduce it. I would say it's probably going to need to be around the 43 millimeter mark. I'm just going to go ahead and grind it down on the grinder, slowly doing it, checking it, making sure that it is right up against it, so there's very little bit of movement. Okay, we've ground it down a little bit. We were at 44.5. You keep measuring it, roughly, 44 in there, right? You want to just take this down slowly, measuring it, knowing where you're at as you're grinding it down, because they do grind down quick. You only have one bucking bar. Okay, so I've reduced it from 44.5 down to 44, now down to 43.5, and we'll check it one more time. I can't stress how important it is to take your time with this process to make sure that your bar. So I took it down only half, and we're almost there. So I'm going to take it down another 25, and we should be almost perfect. Okay, now we're sitting at 43.25, and we're going to give it another fit, and see where we're at. We should be like right on, if not just a tiny bit more. Okay, so that's pretty close. There's still a small gap there, and that could cause, well, no, actually, I hold it up against it. That's pretty close, and the rod is nice and firm, so we know we're right flat up against it. I can almost get away with that. The whole idea is to take it down very slowly, measuring it every time so you know where you're at. If you just go ahead and grind it really quick, you're going to lose where your spot's going to be, and your bucking bar is going to be too short. So that's where we want it for maximum disengagement of your clutch. Okay, so now that we got the bucking bar all set up, I lost some of the lubrication that was in there, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit more in there. Can't have enough grease inside this. That back in there. There we go. And we'll put this cover back on. There, now it's sitting nice and flat everywhere. There's no pressure, and it's right against that flat side of your bucking bar, which is perfect. Like I said, I can't stress enough. Take your time at that stage and make sure that you got a proper fit bucking bar. Okay, tighten this back down. And we got to take down. There's no movement in the bar. It's right flat against that bucking bar, and when we go to throw it out, we got lots of movement. Lots of movement. That bucking bar I just put in there is also a 4140. It's a new steel I'm using for these bucking bars, so I don't get premature wear on heavier springs. We're running tests on it right now. The 4140 is 135,000 tensile strength. I'm hoping that's going to be enough to stop the bucking bar from wearing into the bearing and mushrooming on the end. If that doesn't work on the heavy, like the Ironman clutch springs at over 800 pounds plate pressure, then I'm going to have to go to, say, a 65K Rockwell bucking bar. So when you're going to do, that's for the main adjustment, your length of your bucking bar. Your cable goes in. Keep the cable, push it nice and taut. Tighten up your screw in it. I like to use an Allen screw. I get rid of the other screw. Some guys use the collars on the outside to hold on their cable. I find these Allen hands work quite well. Get the cable nice and taut, and then you might need to do a slight fine tuning of the cable to tighten it up to where the clutch is actually holding disengaged when you're holding in the clutch and locking it down. So if you need to do the fine attunement, fine adjustment, I should say, 10 millimeter on here, loosen this off just a small bit, rotate this clockwise, making this area longer for a very minor adjustment, and then go ahead and relock down your 10 millimeter nut. You might need to do this. You can do these fine adjustments as you're riding. Say you ride for a little while and your clutch gets a little bit loose. That's all you need to do. You just go to this side. You can leave the cable unless there's a lot of slack in the cable, but if it's just a little bit that you're finding it needs adjustment, again, just go ahead and loosen this off and take a screwdriver and just turn it slightly, tighten that back up, and test it, and that should get you a fine adjustment on your clutch.